Just starting up the YouTube stream. And there we go. Just starting up the YouTube stream. I muted you. There we go. Okay, well, let's begin. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm Matt Whitney, the creative director for SDI. We're here with Frederica Helmier, who is the director of events and journeys for SDI. And we have Ed Bastian, who I like to introduce as the most interesting man in the world, and I often do. He's a good friend of mine. I've been working with him for the past 18 months in his Interspiritual meditation, both as a participant and as a facilitator of this practice. So Ed is the founding president of the Spiritual Paths Foundation, provides interspiritual programs, books, and websites for the study of meditation and contemplative practice. He teaches at Antioch University. His teachings include the Interspiritual meditation, the mandala process, mindfulness meditation, Buddhism, spirit and nature, and end of life. So thank you for being here, Ed. We're gonna begin with some practice with this Interspiritual meditation practice, which we'll do together. And we're doing these town hall gatherings over Zoom. And I've had a few questions recently about doing meditation over Zoom. And actually, Ed and I and several others have been doing this practice over Zoom for a long time, well before our quarantine shelter in place. And it does work. I've found it to be really healing and fruitful, even in a digital setting. And so I'm grateful that we have established this practice together. I also want to acknowledge that we live in troubled times, and it's hard to know how to be, how to share our energies, and how to direct them. And one of the big takeaways, and maybe we can talk about this later, of this practice, this particular interspiritual meditation, is how doing it is an act of service to all beings. And so I invite us to, wherever we're coming from, wherever our hearts are, wherever our energies lie, to see this practice together as an opportunity to be of service to all beings. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and allow Ed to share a little bit about ISM itself, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about how it came to be. How did interspiritual meditation originate, and maybe we'll just share that.
Sure, thank you, Matt and Frederica. It's great to be with you, and it's just been a joy for me to work with you and with SDI, and to be able to find ways that we can further the mission of SDI of spiritual companioning using this particular meditation practice, a practice which is really meant to be shared among people of various beliefs and traditions or no traditions, people that are secularly oriented or spiritually oriented. It's a process that honors the diversity of the people in the world and diversity of beings, the diversity of approaches, and celebrates that and sees it as a great strength. That if we're able to join together honoring that diversity and use this contemplative practice as a way to go deeper with each other, we learn a lot from each other. And as we do it, we find that we actually become kind of porous, that whatever our rigid identities are, they tend to melt away, and we receive then the wisdom and practices and experiences of other people that we learn so much from, and it brings us closer to them. So it's a wonderful sort of vehicle for ourselves, no matter how experienced or not experienced we are with a meditation, It's good for us as we want to join with other people in the meditation. It's good for us if we're going to be spiritual companions and want to be able to help people no matter what their predisposition is, no matter what their path is. So it's universal and it's neutral. So I was called to do this, I think. I mean, my own journey really began in Iowa as a Presbyterian, growing up as a Presbyterian. And at a certain point, in the mid 60s, late 60s, not finding that it satisfied my need for truth and for understanding and for a deep practice. And I began exploring other things. I happened to have the opportunity to do a film with the Dalai Lama in 1970. And that was a game changer because he spoke about the validity of all the world's traditions. You don't just have to become a Buddhist. And the opening up for me the possibility that one could learn Buddhism, but also in a way that respected and honored all the other traditions of the world. A little later, as I began to study Buddhism, I saw how the Buddha then respected and taught two various styles of people. So it wasn't like a one-size-fits-all dogma, but it was each sutra, each passage in the scripture was tailored to a certain type of individual. And I began to see how that was happening in other religions as well. If you look at the Bible from that perspective, or the Quran, or other sacred books, you can see that a lot of it has been organized by the great teacher around a specific audience, around a certain kind of person. That I coupled with having started a school in Colorado that was learning style based. I was one of the founding teachers. I became really sensitized to the different learning styles of all the kids that were in our school. And I began to see that our job of teachers wasn't just to download curriculum into them, download information into them, one size fits all, as if they were on an assembly line, but to honor and learn, help them to know how they know. What's their best way of learning? And as a teacher, if we can help discern for ourselves how they learn best, then our obligation is then to help deliver the content that they're going to need in life in a way that suits them. And it becomes a wonderful opportunity for us to recognize the diversity of all the kids in the room and begin teaching to them as they are, not as some sort of prototype of one type of learner. Later, then I was working at the Smithsonian, and I got the idea then, I was doing big projects there, that given the diversity and the pluralism in this country, and given the fact that people are leaving the religions of their birth and reaching out, and now especially where the Pew Trust polls are showing that at least 35% at least of Americans don't have a church. They've never been churched. So they're kind of set free to try to find meaning and purpose all by themselves. And they're not going to have the opportunity to go deeply within a particular tradition. So I began to design then, that was in the 80s, and then I had the chance to starting the Spiritual Paths Foundation in 2002 to go deeper with it, to then begin to create a curriculum and then to design a process that really honored the spiritual styles of each individual doing it. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. So the interspiritual meditation then itself grew out of my experience working with Father Thomas Keating in his Snowmass conference, where he invited meditators from many different traditions to join together. It was really groundbreaking. And I saw firsthand the depth of the contemplative practices from many, many different traditions. And as I sat together with these great meditators from all these traditions, I began to feel a resonance in the room, an unspoken resonance, a kind of energy that went to the depths of our being, each of us doing our own respective contemplative practices. And it gave me the experiential sort of courage then to pursue this even more. So what we're doing now is a 7-step process that I developed working with great teachers in our foundation, trying to discern what was a process, not the one truth that connected us all, but what's a process that the great contemplative traditions use to help people go to the depth of their being, and perhaps even to replicate the experience of the founder of their tradition, and to go deep, 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 connect with each other at that depth, at that heart level, and find a oneness then between us. So what we're going to be experimenting with today and practicing today is the fruit of all that work I've been doing over, well, for decades.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. And it is an honor to be able to participate in this practice with you and be in the lineage of all of these great teachers of contemplative practice. And as you said, it draws on the universality of all of these sacred traditions, and it's also singularly adaptable, that each of us can bring our own wisdom and our own sense of being to the practice. And so we're going to enter into this inner spiritual meditation, and Frederica Helmier has been participating in this practice with us. And so she is going to lead us through this to facilitate the practice. Ed will be our gong ringer and timekeeper. So just to prepare us all, it takes about 20 minutes. It's 7 steps. And there will be a chime to kind of move us through each of the steps as we go. And there will be 2 to 4 minutes of silence between each of those steps. So with that, I invite us to do what we need to do to center ourselves and to bring ourselves into full presence with this moment and with one another. And I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and allow Frederica and Ed to guide us through this time.
Ed, do you want to start us with the 3 gongs?
Sure.
Thanks. May we be healthy and joyful. Our mental health is inseparable from our physical health and our spiritual health. We enter into this meditation today because this practice is one way in which we confront the causes of suffering and illness in ourselves and in others and in the world around us. We take a moment now to sit with our motivation to be here in this practice together. May we awaken gratitude to become the natural rhythm of our heartbeats. We can either view the world through the lens of pessimism and self-pity, or through the lens of appreciation and opportunity. There is always, always something to be grateful for. The earth beneath our feet, that we woke up this morning, that we have air to breathe, for our teachers, our loved ones, for life's challenges that give us the empathy and wisdom to help others. May we walk a path of gratitude, not of complicit surrender to that which is wrong and unjust and evil, not gratitude that denies the reality of suffering, but gratitude nonetheless for the enoughness in our lives. May we be transformed into our highest potential. May we summon the inner courage to imagine the very highest potential for our precious human life and renew our commitment to achieve it. We bring to mind our teachers, our heroes, our mentors, past and present, and what we admire about them. And as we imagine our own future being, we acknowledge our shortcomings. For me today, my privilege, my fragility, my paralysis, my ego, and vow to persevere in our own personal transformation. We take a moment to chip away at our debilitating guilt and generate inward love and forgiveness so that we may unlock the potential for our own transformation. May we be loving and compassionate. The intention of love and compassion are at the heart of all great spiritual and contemplative traditions and are the foundation for health and happiness. May we recognize that a loving and compassionate posture includes heartache in response to suffering. We take these next moments to shift the focus from our own self-centeredness and narcissism into kindness and compassion and love for others. When we do this, we slowly restructure our neurological pathways so that love and compassion become our automatic response to the stresses of human existence. May we be mindful through breathing. May we be mindful of what is happening in our minds and in our bodies without judgment, without wishing that it were different. We empty out distractive thoughts and emotions, sensations, memories, projections for the future. And in sweet emptiness, we rest in the present moment. We spend some minutes now seeking calm with a single pointed focus on breath and breathing. May we become wise through meditation. With a foundation of calm focus, we orient ourselves toward an essential truth or an ultimate reality of both personal and universal existence. This truth has many names and definitions. Drawing from the wisdom of the world's great teachers and sages, our personal practice of meditation opens up in these next minutes to the wisdom that comes to us unbidden. May we be in service to all beings. In this final step of our meditation, we imagine the challenging people and situations that we will encounter today. We allow ourselves to feel the stress and agitation and anger that these situations and people can evoke. And we send into each of them the fruits of today's practice: insight, perseverance, kindness, patience, and wisdom. We rededicate ourselves to serving others and serving movements now in this moment.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Frederica, for beautifully and humbly guiding us through those 7 steps. Thank you, everybody participating with us here on the Zoom call and on the YouTube live stream, for sharing your meditation and your hearts with us. I don't just believe that we are all connected here. Like I can feel it. It's tangible. I know it to be true. So I just wanted to briefly reiterate those 7 steps and what is at the core of them. Frederica so beautifully and eloquently made those her own and shared them with us. But they're at their essence, they are, let's see. So step 1 is motivation. What brings us to our meditation? Why do we do this practice? It's about practicing well-being and health and happiness. Step 2 is gratitude and recognizing that we practice gratitude, that we are grateful for the good things in our life and we are grateful for the challenges and the way that those stretch us. Step 3 is transformation, which is about recognizing that we inherit ideals from our ancestors and our teachers, and that we seek to embody those ideals. And so we are always, through our meditation, changing and are in the process of transforming, becoming more loving beings, which guides us into step 4, which is about being loving and compassionate in the world. To be compassionate beings, to recognize the suffering in others, as well as in us, and learning how to be open-hearted towards all that suffering. And those first four steps sort of set our intention, which guide us into the next 2 steps. Step 5 is being mindful of our breathing. And that breath is at the essence of our very life in this very moment. And so we settle into a deeper sense of presence by focusing on our breathing, to noticing the air going in through our nose and being warmed by our lungs and being expelled through our mouths, and just resting in that. Step 6 is the mysterious step for me, which is becoming wise, or may we become wise through this meditation. And I found that defining wisdom is elusive. And I don't know how you acquire it except by continuing to show up every day and showing up to this practice and these intentions, and somehow you become wise through all of that experience and all of that practice. And then the final step is step 7, which is may we be of service to all beings. And so having gone through these core steps, the last one is an intention that we set to bring that meditation, to carry it in our hearts as we go out into our lives, our everyday lives and our work, that we are able to embody this very meditation in all that we do, whether we're cognizant of it or not. So that's the summary of the 7 steps. And Ed has found that there's a lifetime of practice there, which you have incorporated into your course and your website, but you also have another element to this, which is called the spiritual styles. And so I did as part of my facilitator training, a little mini cohort with Frederica and a couple of other friends. And we really resonated with the spiritual styles. And so Ed, and the interesting thing is can you just share a little bit about the spiritual styles, the 12 styles, and why they're so important?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks so much, Frederica, for beautiful meditation, and Matt for articulating what we're up to here. And indeed, it's a practice. When you look into each of the 7, these are essential practices that you find either as independent practices. You find them embedded in the world's great traditions. And so what's perhaps unique here is that we're bringing them all together into a continuity of a single practice, where all of these what once might have been disparate practices that we did now and again, now we bring them all together into one. And you can imagine, as Frederica alluded, that the effect and neuroscience and fMRI images of the brain of people meditating now show the extraordinary effect of meditation on the brain, and how the flight, fright, worry, stress of the amygdala is then dampened and controlled by the frontal cortex, the sort of the executive functions of the mind. And that each of these steps in the meditation then also not only from an ethereal, spiritual, non-brain, but the brain itself echoes in it and forms new neural pathways within it in slightly different but interconnected ways with each of these seven. So they have sort of a value added from doing them all rather than just one, singularly by itself. So Matt, can I share a screen? I'm not sure.
I don't know if I set that up or not.
Let me see if I can do it.
There
Oh,
you
I
go.
can do it. Yeah. Okay, so this sort of to review, here are the 7 steps in this 7-step mandala. And you can see here, and if you go to the website, you can learn more about this, but the first, the motivation, which is sort of summarizing becoming healthy and happy, but our motivation can be whatever you're making the motivation to be. Each of these can find synonyms that are meaningful to you. They're not a dogma, but you use your own words, as Frederica showed us, her own way of approaching the meditation. And then we go to the gratitude, and then we go to the transformation, and then to compassion, and then to our mindfulness, to our wisdom, and then to our service. So those are the 7 sort of synopsis. Then there's another course that we'll be doing in the fall called the mandala process, in which the spiritual styles are shown a little more clearly. So when you look at this, I'm not going to go into depth on it now, but when you look at this, the spiritual paths or the interspiritual mandala, it's made up of 3 concentric rings. The outer ring pertains to our spiritual styles. The next ring in pertains to our big spiritual questions. The idea here is that if we can start with the way we learn, with our own styles, and we can ask our own questions, then we have the juice, we have the motivation, we have the curiosity to live back into our questions that we had as little kids, but kind of got drummed out of us in normal curriculum and more normal life. So begin with our styles. Say your style here, I'm pointing to the arts, and say your question was, what's the nature of consciousness? And let's say I want to go to Buddhism and ask Buddhism that question. Or maybe I want to go to Islam and ask Islam that question. So then we have resources on the websites that help one find information about that style, that question from a variety of different traditions. So, so here again, this isolates the spiritual styles, which are then around this outer ring of the mandala. The way of the arts, for those of us who are predisposed towards dance, towards poetry, towards song, towards music, towards artistic expression, or for whom the arts is a way to stimulate our practice, that we surround ourselves in our home and our lives with these type of arts, poetry, painting, music, that reinforce our spiritual aspirations. The way of the body, which I call the kinesthete, but there's somebody who's very somatically sensitive, feels things in their body. People who are predisposed to do yoga or qigong or walks or running or whatever it might be, but use those as a vehicle towards contemplative practice and spiritual practice. The way of devotion, for people who are more devotionally oriented, that would be in the 4 yogas of Hinduism, bhakti yoga. The way of the imagination. We learn that all of our future is predetermined in a way by our imagination. What are we imagining ourselves to become in the next moment, in the next day, during our lives? Imagination is so powerful. Some of us are more predisposed to that. The way of love and compassion. Some of us are just more naturally loving and compassionate, but we may need to work on another one of the styles to help bring fullness into our being. The way of contemplation and meditation, The way of the mystic, for people that have had experiences that they can't explain. They might be deep spiritual experience, deep unity, non-dual experiences, or maybe even of spirits. But sometimes those experiences can unbalance us if we're not finding balance, in a practice. So the way of the mystic is an example, might be supported by, say, down here, the way of reason. That we find that some of the greatest teachers and saints of all time have been both mystics and had sharp intellects, so that there was not a disconnect between their mystical experience and their rational mind. They didn't have to give up the rational mind in order to become spiritual. They didn't have to give up being a mystic, but they find a way. And so with all of these 12, we learn to see them in ourselves, learn to honor them, learn to celebrate them, and then to get them all working in harmony with each other. The way of nature, for people who are naturally predisposed to be in the environment, that nature is their natural way of expressing and feeling spiritual. The way of prayer, the way of reason, the way of relationships. So, and you could say, and again, in the 4 yogas of Hinduism, that kind of karma yoga, that way of being in the world, of helping other people, is a spiritual path. And the way of the sage, which is the way of wisdom, which we could call we could call it gnosis or Sophia or prajna, which is a deep wisdom that we might have learned about from our great teachers, but then because of our natural capacity, we then, through the meditation, we do actually become wise. And with that wisdom, we really know how we can help other people most effectively. So that's the overview. And just then when you can go to the site and do one of these profiles for yourself, gratis on the site. So here it is, discover your spiritual styles. And this is what it looks like. There's 60 statements. You rank yourselves 1 through 5. And then having done so, then you can see a bar graph or a pie chart, which gives you sort of a snapshot of, at this stage of your life, which of these styles are more dominant, which are more recessive. And so you can say, oh, well, here, my way of reason is strong. My way of prayer is low. And my way of imagination is low. My way of wisdom or my way of contemplation and meditation are high. So we begin to see them all, an internal picture of who we are deep down, the archetypes, so to speak, that reside within us. We begin working with them. So this is an art. This is something that we cultivate as our way of working with ourselves, honoring ourselves, who we are, finding practices and teachers that fit with who we are, and then learning to work with the styles that are within us.
Yeah.
It's kind of an overview.
Thank you for this.
Yeah.
And the thing that's so sort of paradoxically wonderful about it, it's something that you've said before, Ed, which is that some people are just never going to sit still on a cushion for their meditation practice. So you have this whole site about meditation, then you're like, but you may meditate in other ways, which is these spiritual styles. And Frederica, I want to ask you, having worked through this process, how have you found that, how have you identified on those spiritual styles, and how have you been able to incorporate them into your own practice?
Yeah, I'll share some thoughts on that. And also just want to invite folks who are listening to please feel free to put your questions into the Q&A. We're gonna turn to those next. There's already 1 or 2 up there. I really enjoyed the spiritual styles. I enjoy any opportunity to sort of gain like insight into myself. And so I've taken this test twice now. I find it interesting, first of all, that I can take it at even just a couple of weeks apart and find that the results are different. Each time I've taken it though, my top 2 are the same and my bottom 2 are the same. My top 2 are consistently wisdom and nature. And my bottom 2 are consistently prayer and art. And what I have enjoyed about that insight is that it not just sort of reaffirms something I already know about myself in the way that I might most might just engage in these practices in a way that sort of honors what I'm already inclined to, but that it's also an invitation to not dismiss the ones at the bottom, not be like, prayer is not for me, and like art is not for me, I am not an artist, but recognize that there might be things that are unexplored there that I may want to offer some of my time and attention to, and see if there is some potential there to engage with the divine or the beyond through those mediums. Whereas for most of my life, I've sort of dismissed them or walked away from them, at least temporarily. The other thought I wanted to share is just how fruitful and freeing it has been for me to adapt the 7 parts of this meditation to what I need, and sometimes to adapt them pretty significantly. The example I want to give is the 4th step about transformation. When I started sort of digging deeper into the material that Ed provides on the Spiritual Paths website, I began to notice something that I found very helpful, which is that transformation is very tricky for me. And if anyone else out there is into the Enneagram and identifies as an Enneagram 1, you might know what I'm talking about. For me, transformation is this sort of constant impulse, and it's not always healthy. So there's a sort of constant desire or need to like reform, not just things beyond me, but myself as well, and to improve myself. And it can get into like the realm of perfectionism. And becoming aware of that allowed me to adapt the transformation part of the meditation, not as this sort of like additional reminder to me that I'm not good enough and I could be better and should be better, and I have to continually strive to reach this kind of higher version of myself, but to recognize all the different ways that transformation can look like. And for me in this meditation, that can look like rest. It can look like taking a break from all of that. It can look like pausing to say, like, I am good enough. I am loved. That is a form of transformation. So there are layers upon layers upon layers to this practice. There are depths to plumb with all of this.
Yeah, thank you. And you just expressed so well, the real benefit of this tool, I should mention, for spiritual directors and companions, which we are a large community of, is the ability for this tool to help us articulate just how we connect with the divine and how we connect with our true selves, and the ways that these tools help us to kind of get to the core of that, and also to, as you said, Frederica, to note like where you score low on those spiritual styles are not necessarily like things that you should ignore or things that you are bad at, but might be things that need nurturing and tending. I have certainly found that for myself. Ed, I want to ask you, and we've got a few questions. So Marilyn asks, is the ultimate goal to have balance in all the styles?
That's a great question. I think the first thing is to recognize that we have them. It's like, we have lenses that are sort of deep in our unconscious, really, and they're predispositions. So we have their archetypes that kind of govern the way in which we view the world and the way in which we approach spiritual practice. We're not even aware that they're there, but we might find that we say, well, I tried going to this teacher and it looked like it might work, but it didn't work. And then I tried reading that and that didn't work. And I tried that book. No, well, almost, but not quite. So the idea then is to begin to look deeply within yourself to say, well, what are my ways of approaching? Who would be the right teacher for me? What would be the right practice for me? And by looking internally at your spiritual styles, you begin to awaken to this variety, this wonderful variety that exists within you. And then you can accentuate one and say, okay, from the way, if you're just like an intellect, you got to have reasons. Well, you better find a teacher that honors that, and that teacher may lead you to your devotional side, but it might take using that sort of in the beginning. So, and in the end, I do believe we want all these to be working in harmony. It's getting all the cylinders of the engine working together. And then we're really on a path. We got all of our internal work in it because we know that this process of becoming a kind, loving, spiritual, transformed human being is a lifetime worth of work. And we need to bring all of the aspects of our inner being into play so that we might be able to fulfill our deepest aspirations.
Yeah, thank you.
Hmm.
Elizabeth says, thank you so much for this beautiful experience, the brain candy aspect and the soulful aspect. How do the different wisdom traditions play into this process? I'm not clear how this meditation incorporates those sources.
Well, what it was for me was I worked with great teachers throughout my life, and then with Thomas Keating, and then I started the Spiritual Paths Foundation, and we had over 40 different meditative teachers from different traditions joining together to essentially do what we did at the Snowmass Conference, sharing meditations, trying each other meditations out, and seeing and just sharing with each other. It was a profound experience. I found wonderful diversity there. That not everybody is on the same page, and not everybody's going to describe the end goal in the same way or God in the same way, if there is one. Many people would ask the question, if they're apathetic, well, maybe I shouldn't name it. So there are all kinds of different approaches within the tradition. So I found maybe the most productive way was to look at this as a process, not as an end goal. So I began looking for the processes that these different traditions had in common, and not just the one single point of wisdom that they all agreed on. So the processes I learned by working with all these people, and then I kind of summarized them and put them in the form that we did today.
Great, thank you. Frederica, do you have any questions, or is there anything on the tip of your tongue?
I just wonder if we might take a minute before we wrap up, and this is probably for you, Matt, to talk about how this could be used by spiritual companions and spiritual directors.
Yeah, well, I know that I can speak as an organization. SDI is an interfaith, interspiritual community. That means that we come from very different walks of life, different faith traditions, different religions, and we go beyond mere tolerance of one another's traditions and backgrounds, but we seek to learn from one another and to connect in community. And I have found this interspiritual meditation practice to be something that we can all come together and do, regardless of our background, and be authentic with one another and share that space. And that alone has been, I think, really rich for me as a spiritual companion, and a seeker, journeyer, wayfarer. But also, as I was listening to Frederica share, I recognize how the course and the website can be such a tool for spiritual directors and companions. So if you are working with clients and somebody is kind of, maybe, I don't know what, starting out on their journey, trying to find language, trying to find a sense of authentic self, that the website offerings provide a really valuable tool for people to work through some of that. And that when they come together with their director or companion, they can review, they can reflect on what they've learned through doing the ISM training and practice. And so I think for both of those reasons, I find the tool to be of real benefit to the SDI community. Let's see. Ed, I have one last question for you, and then I want to invite you to give us a quick summary about your upcoming course that SDI is co-sponsoring. SDI is a community of spiritual directors and companions, which are by their very nature mature contemplatives. And so we talk about the ISM site as developing your meditation, your spiritual style. But I also want to recognize that most of our people in our community have really developed their meditation and their spiritual practice over the years. And so maybe you could speak a little bit to the benefit of continuing perhaps with the ISM course for somebody who has been doing this for a while.
Well, for people that already have a mature practice, they don't need to do this. But they might find it's useful. But if you're trying to help other people who are just getting started, they may not have resonance with your practice, your idea of God, your idea of religion. So the idea of being a companion then is to help other people to develop their own personal way of approaching it that might align with your tradition, but might not. So our mission becomes grander than just trying to make somebody a good Christian from our version of Christianity or Jewish or whatever it might be. Is to help each individual develop their path and to draw on the wisdom of a variety of sources. And maybe they will find that one tradition that they're going to go deeply in, which is good. But maybe, because frankly, there are over 100 million people in America right now that don't have a tradition. They don't have a religion. So we can't get them to lockstep into our version of spirituality, but we can help them find their own. So that's what this process and the course we're going to start next Wednesday, the 15th, I think. I welcome any of you who might be interested just to give it a shot, either for your own practice or as a methodology to help other people, to come on in and share the experience with all of us. And we'll all benefit by the diversity of our respective wisdom and traditions and join together as a broader sort of interspiritual community working together.
Wonderful. I wanted to point out to people that in the chat, I've put in a couple of links. The first one is to a registration for your upcoming course that starts next week. So it's guided through each of the steps, each of the 7 steps, with each week offering a teaching on that particular step.
Sorry, Matt, I'm just going to jump in and say, I think you sent it to the panelists and not to everyone. So I think
Oh,
I'm
shoot.
sending it now to all
Thank you.
attendees. Sure.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Frederica, for doing that. So those links will be there. Also, I posted a link to, and Frederica, you can share that one as well. Ed has recorded a series of these meditations, both audio and video tracks, which are freely available on his site. And so those have been shared as well. We invite you to work through those and play those as your meditation, as you begin to kind of learn about the practice. And Frederica recorded her own a while back, and in a really beautiful way and authentic way. And so I find the video helpful. The videos are helpful when I don't quite know how to meditate that day, with the sense that some days I will and some days I won't. The survey, for those who are interested, because we all love taking surveys, I understand that's part of registering for the site, correct? That the survey is available by registering for the course. So we've provided that link as well. There's a monthly.
It's also freely available to anybody who wants to do it.
It is.
Yeah,
Okay.
so anybody can do it, whether they register or not. It's freely available, along with the meditations are freely available.
I can add that on here.
Thank you. And so I guess we're at our time. And so I just wanted to thank everybody for being here, for being a part of this conversation, for being a part of this practice. Again, I take great heart in doing this together. Ed, I'm grateful to you and for the friendship that has developed between us over the last year. And I will look forward to working with you and being a part of this upcoming course, both as someone working with SDI and also as just me. just me continuing to develop this practice and go deeper together in community. So thank you for offering this to our community. Frederica, do you have anything you wanted to share before we sign off?
Thank you all for taking an hour out of your Thursday morning to be with us and honor yourself and your practice. And I'd love to see some of you on the course. I'm going to take it. I'm going to go the second time through because there's just so much richness there. So I'd love to see some of you there in the course.
Yeah, for sure. Ed, any final thoughts before we sign out?
No, thank you. It's been fun. I think this work can be fun. You know, if we're doing it all together with joy and just sharing with each other, not holding too tightly to our one fixed position, is that it is a fun process, and I find it's the one thing in life that I enjoy the most. And so, I just welcome you all to come on and share the fun with Interspiritual Meditation and the websites that Matt and Frederica have made available to you. So you're welcome. It's been wonderful to be with you all. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Blessings to you, and hope to see you soon. In a couple of weeks, we'll do the State of SDI Town Hall, where Reverend Seifu and our coordinating council will talk about the organization and where we've come from and where we are and where we're going. So that's in 2 weeks, June 18th, and I invite you to join us for that. So we will sign off. Blessings to everybody, and we will see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.